If your Kohler equipped lawn vehicle is hard starting, as in you have to crank it for a long time before it starts, or it won't even fire at all without using starting fluid, I got you covered. Stick around and I'll show you the cause and the adjustment to fix it. Just a note, this video pertains to equipment with Kohler engines that have the choke control integrated with the throttle, like demonstrated here, where this position of the lever, where there is a soft stop or detent, is full throttle, and going forward past that point activates the choke. Also, I'm demonstrating the fix on a Kohler 7000 series engine in a Troy-Bilt zero-turn mower, but the information may apply to other series of Kohler engines as well, including those found in other manufacturers of lawn equipment such as Cub Cadet, Toro, Ariens, Gravely, Dixie Chopper, Craftsman, and Husqvarna, provided they have the same integrated manual choke as shown earlier. If you have a machine with a separate choke knob or one with an automatic choke or smart choke, information contained herein will not apply. Looking at the back of the mower now, and I have the air box off so we can see what's happening with the carburetor, or more specifically with the choke. This is the throttle mechanism on the back of the engine, and this lever here is connected to the rod that moves the choke. This is at idle, and as we start to move the lever forward, this mechanism rotates, but notice that the lever for the choke stays in the same position. Now we're at that detent where full throttle is. Then as I move the lever forward into the choke position, it's only then does this lever start to move to close the choke. So I'm moving the lever all the way forward, and it's closing the choke, but only about halfway, maybe a little bit more. It should be closing a lot further than that, and the fact that it isn't is why the mower is hard starting when the engine is cold, and especially when it's cold outside. And here is where our problem is. We close the throttle and open it back up to the detent. This is where it's at 100%. See this gap? Now that gap isn't that big, but by the time that this does engage and start to move the choke, you are just about out of throw on the throttle lever. This is the throttle cable where it comes from the operator station, and if we take this and we move it back, we'll have to loosen up where it's captured here, and we move the whole cable back, we can take up that lash so that we don't have so much movement before it starts to move the choke lever. Before I make any adjustments though, I'm just going to mark the cable here right at this clip where it's captured. Now you don't have to do this, I'm just doing it for visualization purposes for the video, just so we can see how far this cable actually moves. To close up this gap then, we're going to pull this cable out or away from the engine. Now, very important, be sure the throttle lever is at full throttle position at that detent, not in the choke position before you start. I've loosened the bolt for the retainer clip, and you can also see that black mark that I made on the cable. So I'm going to pull on the throttle cable until the throttle mechanism just starts to engage the choke lever. Now that I've got that where I want it, I have to be sure to hold the cable and not let it move until I can get that bracket tightened back down again. Now that we've eliminated that null zone, the choke gets more closement. Yeah, that's a word now. Although adjusting that cable does change the full back position of the throttle linkage, no worries, there's lots of movement here before it comes off idle, so your RPMs at idle will be the same as before. Here is our choke movement now after the adjustment. And just as a reminder, this is how much closure we had before, which doesn't really do much except make the motor run rough when it's actually running, but it doesn't really help it start for shit. Before I put this back together though and try it out, two things. One important, one semi-important. First, the important thing, this lever could be bent backwards towards the rear or even twisted. When that happens, the cable pulls on it at an angle, and near the end of its travel, instead of continuing to move the throttle and subsequently the choke, it will flex instead, and thus insufficient throttle linkage movement. Oddly enough, even after performing the throttle cable adjustment, if this flexes, you can still end up without the proper amount of throw. So if it is bent outwards towards the back at all, bend it back towards the front until it's pretty much touching this spring, and also be sure it's not twisted either. Proper alignment will eliminate the flex on that lever. And second, although I show the throttle cable adjustment without the air box on the engine, it isn't absolutely necessary to remove it. You can see the action of the choke with the air box on. As a matter of fact, to perform the adjustment, you don't even really need to see the choke, just the throttle mechanism and the choke lever underneath. However, if you are going to remove the air box, because it is a little easier to get to everything without it, to do that, you remove the 3 8mm bolts on top, and on bottom on the car mounting studs, those bolts are 10mm. And you'll also need to remove the crankcase breather hose. Okay, I'm going to test this now to see how fast it starts. This is completely cold, hasn't run for hours. Before it took at least 10 seconds, maybe 15 seconds of cranking before we'd even think about starting. Hopefully this helps you out if you are having the same problem, and thanks for watching.